Nope, same space, yeah.
All right, I'll just get started. So hi, I'm Clay Venitis. I run a small organization called Fairbanks Farm Access. I have a full-time job at a different nonprofit now, so I'm doing like some sort of volunteer time for this organization at this stage, but I'm an attorney as well. And I just wanted to give folks an update on farm taxes in Alaska as a state and in Fairbanks North Star Borough, just because there have been two updates that I think folks should know about, and it might be helpful for us to better understand. I'll also note two things, well, a couple things at the start. The slides are ugly because I don't like making slides. So I literally chose the first template that Google Slides had available to it. So the colors may be abrasive for some folks. Secondly, I don't have every answer about taxes in the borough and at the state, and the best folks to speak to if you have a specific question based on the facts of your land are, of course, the assessing department. With the borough, that would be Cecily Manning. I spoke with Cecily before this presentation, and she wanted me to impart some information to you guys as well, and I'll do that at the end. But and third, I guess, and finally, I think that this topic flares a lot of attentions, and understandably so. I mean, this is money in your pocket going somewhere else. And I think people have pretty strong feelings about a lot of these topics. And I'm not here today to discuss whether we think this is good tax policy or bad tax policy. I'm here to explain what the current tax policy is and what the recent changes were. I'd be very happy to get a beer after or a coffee and chat whether this is good policy or bad policy after this. But during the presentation, I don't necessarily think it's the best use of our time because it requires a nuanced conversation that I don't think we have time for in the probably 20 minutes I have left. So anyway, it's going to be an update. So this is to provide an update. My goal is to provide an update on the state of farm property taxes in Alaska and the borough in light of some recent changes. And let's get on the same page. So this is, I find extremely important when talking about this topic. What these terms mean, everybody here is smart enough to know these terms. I'm not saying I'm educating you as to something you don't know. I just think sometimes when we have conversations about using these terms, we are operating from different definitions in our head. And that disconnect or that disconnect can cause some issues that aren't necessarily, that don't necessarily need to be there. So the farm land and farm structures is pretty obvious. You got the land that you're working, and then you have structures like and these are, you know, buildings or storage facilities or various additions to the land. So it's important to draw that distinction. I know you guys know the difference between that, but it's important to draw that distinction because there are different rules for land as there are for structures. A tax break is just the colloquial term we use for not being taxed at the level that you would expect to be taxed like any other property. So it's kind of a tax break is a broad term. It's certainly not the technical term. I think it's fine to use, but I just wanted to point that out. And then so discount and exemption are that distinction is incredibly important. I could even have done this. I could have said like we have a break and then 2 bullets, discount and exemption, because that's a break sort of means either a discount or an exemption. A discount is you are not being taxed for the full and true value of the property. So this borough property taxes are required to tax your property as a default for its full and true value. If you are being taxed for only the farm use of the land, which we'll get into, but that's the tax break you're getting for your farmland and it's statewide. If you're being farmed for just the farm use, that is a discount because the farm use of land is always going to be lower than the full and true value, simply because you're limiting the use of the land. you don't get to develop on it. So on the market, someone's going to see it as of lower value because they can't do everything they might possibly want to do with the land. So that's a discount. Now that's different from an exemption, which is you are just not being taxed for either a portion of that full and true value or a total, that would be a partial exemption, or a total exemption, which is you're just not being taxed at all for the property, whether it be the land or the structure. So I just want to get those clear because we'll be getting into those. The difference has a lot of effect on some of the changes that have happened recently. Oh, and if folks have questions like explanatory questions, what does this mean? What does that mean? Please just raise your hand whenever you want. I'm happy to chat about it while we go through. So still getting on the same page, we have like a statewide law change that happened at the end of the legislative session in 2024. And then we have a borough specific change, which just happened at the start of this year, kind of from the end of December over to January. And so those are just the two things I'm going to be talking about. And it's important to know, like, we have these statewide requirements that apply to every borough, and then we just have Fairbanks North Star Borough's rules. So the state law change is kind of twofold. There's the rule that is required for all municipalities, and then there was a change that is an optional choice that each municipality can take. So what happened? It's called SB 161. It was passed, or it was the main sponsor was Senator Bjorkman, and I think he saw what we did in Fairbanks North Star Borough in 2023 of getting using what was already in the state law, and getting that full tax exemption for farm structures. And then he ran with that at the state level, and they got the law changed where every municipality now has to provide, already had to provide a tax discount for farmland. So already statewide, your farmland must be assessed only for its farm use value, not its full and true value. So that's always been the case. That law now encompasses structures. So you now have automatically everybody's farm land and structures are discounted for their farm use, not for the full and true value. And what they also changed was the eligibility requirements. So your eligibility requirements for decades have been that 10% of your income comes from farm activities. They got rid of that, and it's now that the land that you're getting, land or structure you're getting a discount from, you must be producing at least $2,500 of agricultural products in that year to be considered a farmer to then get this discount. You also have to file a Form 1040, but that's an extremely low barrier to entry because you just file that as a farmer. You don't actually have to have a certain amount of sales or anything like that. Question?
Net or gross?
I think it's gross. Yeah. But double check me on that one. That's off the top of my head. And so yeah, and then I believe that it expanded the definition of what your land could be used for, or at least fleshed that definition out to crops, fruits, other agricultural products for human consumption or livestock. They also expanded it to aquaculture. I'm very interested to see how they actually parse that one out, but that was added to this law as well. So that just applies. That will be applying. Fairbanks North Star Borough will be applying that discount to farmland and structures now going forward, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Your question?
Does it have to be zoned ag land? Like, what if you're?
No, you just have to like sell that amount of products. Yeah. If you're miszoned, you might have other issues with respect to getting a tax exemption, but yeah, it doesn't have to be a particular zoning. It's just, but okay, that's actually an important point because Some people, we had this law change in 2023 in the borough that I'll talk about a little bit more. And I do believe that in light of, you guys know way more about this than I do, so I'm preaching to the choir here, but in light of sort of sometimes a rocky relationship with the tax assessing department, especially with whether there's something on your land or whether your land is being used in a certain way that you don't have, you know, a clear answer on its zoning. A lot of folks maybe don't even want to apply for these discounts because to draw attention to their land is something that they don't want to do. So like that, in reality, your question with the zoning really matters. But it is not part of the eligibility. So now the other law change at the statewide level was that an optional change for any municipality, they can do a partial or total exemption. So again, this is farther than a discount. This is just either partially or totally exempt paying taxes for farmland or structures. You can do this by a vote of the assembly. It used to be that you had to do a vote of the assembly and then you get a popular vote. So it was an ordinance by the assembly and then the popular vote has to vote yay or nay. This is what we did in 2023 with Proposition 2. That was voted in by the assembly and then got a popular vote that voted for it. No longer. Now it's just a vote by the assembly. The eligibility net for this total or partial or total exemption for land or structures updated to the same eligibility requirements we just discussed with respect to the land. It's $2,500 of agricultural products, file Form 1040 saying you're a farmer. And the land definition is, I believe, the same or quite similar. And then the structures, importantly, the structure definition for this one expanded. It's for growing, storing, or processing crops. That's what was there before. Milk products, that was there before, but now sheltering, stabling, milking dairy animals, poultry, or livestock. So it used to be limited to dairy animals, now it's expanded. This would require your assembly to bring it forward and vote on it. Let's get into the Fairbanks North Star Borough and how they have responded to this. So that was the change at the end of the legislative session 2024. It passed like on the last day or something like that. I was trying to follow it, and then turns out if you're not actually in Juneau, it's really difficult to understand what's going on in Juneau. And I'm an attorney with like a lot of experience doing this, and I was constantly calling the legislative office folks, asking them how I do anything. It's very difficult to understand from abroad. So, okay, let's get to the borough. So this recent change was the old code, the code that Proposition 2 passed in 2023, what used this portion of the state law that not a lot of people were thinking about, that fully tax exempted farm structures. It was voted on and it passed, and but it had the eligibility requirements from before. It had the 10% of your income eligibility requirement. So with this change, which we just talked about, let me go back. Oh, could you go back one? Yeah. So now with this change, now I have this different eligibility requirement. So this is what happened. It's getting kind of confusing for folks, but we have this, Fairbanks North Star Borough, and I say we, I just mean the borough, passed the full tax exemption for farm structures, and that was just on the books. Then the statewide law changed and changed the eligibility requirement for just such an exemption. And so now we have this thing on the books, this law that fully tax exempts your farm structures, but it has the 10% of your income eligibility requirement, not the $2,500 requirement. So the borough decided it needed to reconcile that change, and it made a law change. Now it did quite a bit with this law change. So first of all, it did the and this passed on the beginning of January. I forget what specific date it was, but The first thing it did, which makes a lot of sense to me, and it was actually required by every borough, is as we saw, because every municipality was then required to apply a farm use discount to land and structures, it with this $2,500 ag products requirement or eligibility requirement, the borough said, okay, we need to change that to make sure, we need to change our code to make sure we are saying now the borough's property taxes for farmland and structures applies a farm use discount, and the eligibility requirement, the key one, is this $2,500 for ag products, not the 10% income requirement. That change was required by the state law. They went a little farther though, and they also repealed Prop 2, so they took away the full tax exemption that was passed in 2023 for structures, claiming that that this was a way to get in compliance with state law. So what I think that they mean is, as I had said before, because the tax exemption for structures that was passed in 2023 had the 10% income requirement, the borough decided, oh, that's not in compliance. That doesn't fit with the eligibility requirement of the $2,500 in ag products. So we need to get rid of that. What they could have done, and what I should have explained in comment, I'm not saying what I say actually changes anything. I just mean, if I am really mad, I should have been there. But it also happened over Christmas break, and so I think a lot of people were gone. And I literally didn't even know it was moving so fast. Is that what they could have done is just change the eligibility requirements for the tax exemption that was passed to the $2,500 ag products, and then it would have been in complete compliance. In fact, it would have even been like stronger because it was voted on by the people. So in any case, I'll have one more slide where we can chat about that. But the tax exemption for structures is no longer on the books for the borough code. Cecily Manning wanted me to let folks know. I called her to say, hey, am I understanding this right? She confirmed, and she said she wanted me to let folks know that to anybody who is benefiting from the farm structure tax exemption currently, she will be reaching out to you and explaining how the change affects you and what's going to happen going forward. I don't know what the contents of that call are going to be. And I will say I did a Public Records Act request on who apply or how many folks apply for that tax exemption, and just to get a sense of like how it's working. I like to keep tabs on what's good tax policy and bad tax policy, and to me it's good if it's leading to more local food being grown. And so I was just keeping tabs on that. If you want to talk about what I found, we can chat. So this, probably my last slide, I think, or substantive slide, is if you want the tax exemption for structures back, you would have to go to the assembly and just say, hey, we want to exercise our optional power to have a full tax exemption for structures. And it will have the new eligibility requirements. So that's, the reason that like it's a little bit, that this is a little concerning that it was removed. That's fine, because it might be a pretty straightforward fix. You go, as long as the majority of the assembly would vote for it, we would go back to the assembly to request that that be applied. I will say the new law has an updated definition of structures. It's expanded from dairy animals to poultry or livestock. So if you go back to the assembly to get a change, you would have the $2,500 of agricultural products and an updated definition of what you can do with your structure. So I'm going to be talking with some farmers this week about maybe proposing to the assembly this change. But again, I'm just letting folks know if you would like to be part of the conversation, just let me know. I have my email here. I hope this like black and orange and white was fine for everybody, but yeah, so that's pretty much it. And there might be a lot of questions. I know I like glossed over a lot of things, but And again, I don't have every answer in terms of how these laws are actually going to get interpreted. I'm very interested in that because there's a huge question as to like, to what extent, what portion of your land are they actually applying the discount or the exemption to? Is it, what makes a farm? Is it just the land that's being, worked? Is it the land that's being worked, but the surrounding land obviously has an effect on what you're growing? So I never got a straight answer from state legislators on how they were interpreting that when they were trying to pass this thing. Yeah, so the question.
So how much of a discount are we talking about? Do you know that? Because in the time past, it was deferral, right? It was the.
Yeah, so here, it is a discount, and what is discounted is deferred. So that like, the amount of difference between the full and true value and the farm use value, that's the difference, right? And that difference is what's being deferred. So the amount of the discount just depends on how your land. That would just come down to the borough's property tax assessor making a decision about what is its farm use value. And then what is its full and true value. And
Okay, I
so
didn't understand what you said about deferral.
so like, when you're saying the law as it is, I have to check whether they removed the deferral or not. Or at least for the structures exemption, I can't remember. I'll have to look that up. But my point was merely that the amount that you are getting, like, I don't know what word you would use, but like forgiven, or the amount of taxes that you otherwise wouldn't be paying if you weren't farming, that amount is what is essentially being deferred, in that if you stop farming after, I forget the specifics of the rule, but if you stop farming after like 7 years, they say that you will owe what you were discounted. But I can't, and that's to make you continue farming. Yeah,
That's kind of important.
yeah. No, for sure. And so like, but I believe that I have to review the rule to see whether they have removed that deferral or not. I think it's still in there, but I'll have to check the.
Yeah, 'cause that, who wants to just have to pay later? I mean.
Oh, well, no, this is only if you stop. It's only if you stop farming. And then if you, yeah, and then if you sell the land though, it would, as I have seen it happen, I'm not saying it's like a perfect answer for you, but like, as I have seen it happen, if you were selling the land, it would be up to the new owner whether they want to farm it or not, and then that deferral would be on them. A lot of times that's just, if they don't want to farm it, they want to do something else with it, that would just be baked into the purchase price, right? Their recognition of the fact that they would be on the hook for that time.
So this isn't Alaska, but when my dad had the farm deferral down in Washington, when we went to sell the land, the people didn't want to farm. So we split those taxes he's talking about. We had to split that amount.
That's 7 years of back taxes.
Yeah, whatever it was, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you can always again, I have seen it negotiated into the purchase price of the person who, and just, and again, I'm not here to like say whether it's good policy, bad policy, but like,
Right.
we could talk about that another time, but like, just to explain or to clarify the thought behind that is, if this is giving you a benefit to try to keep land in production and keep it creating, local food, the idea would be to try to keep an incentive that it's still doing that and not just being developed. And yeah, so that's the idea behind that. But yeah.
Are there specific assessors that you know of that are doing the farmland so that we're being evaluated consistently, or are all the borough assessors supposed to know what farmland?
Yeah, so there is a state tax assessment department who should be providing consistency guidance to every borough assessor. I have no clue what that looks like. So, but it's important. It's a good question because it's important to recognize like who the decision makers actually are. And so
Apples to apples, oranges.
yeah, I would like to, so I don't know how that guidance happens, but it should be there. at least the way it is structured is there's a State Department that is providing. Yeah, if anybody else has any questions, yeah, so feel free to email me if you have follow-ups. I think it's it's a great question on the deferral. I wanna check on that because, I didn't see any language on it, which makes me think it's still there, but I would like to double check because I know that was a concern for a lot of people. I mean, I spoke with farmers who did not apply for the tax, the structure exemption because of fear that they may just stop farming at some point. So now I'm on the hook. You know, so
Right.
I have to double check to see if it's still there. But again, it's like, this is where tax policy questions really come down because it's, do you think some might think it's right to keep it in so that it stays in farmland? Some say, well, it hurts more than it helps because then if people don't even apply for it because they're afraid of that. So this is where we kind of get into that debate.
What happens if there's a bad crop year and you don't make $2,500?
This law accounts for that, and it says that like in a particularly bad year, you're not necessarily taken off. It also defines $2,500 of ag products, quite like lightly. I think it even says that if your land normally would produce $2,500 of products. The reason it has that definition is because that comes from the way the USDA defines a farm for ag census purposes. And in fact, the amount of money that the value of the ag products that you might sell in a year is actually taken from the ag census definition too, but it's $1,000. Which is a number from the 1970s that has never been updated. So there are some comments about to what extent that defines a farm or not. But that's a different conversation. So they actually originally had it as 1,000 and then upped it to 2,500 when a few farmers came forward and said like, had some thoughts about that.
A question about like horticulture. The greenhouse growers and stuff, are they under structures exempt or not?
Yeah, I think if because the definition is, and again, this is a question for Cecily Manning in the borough, because I forget how it was. Sometimes I can go back and sometimes I can't.
Where are you trying to go?
Just back a couple, one more. Yeah, that's good, thanks. Growing, storing, and processing crops, to me qualifies a greenhouse. But if people have experience having applied for their greenhouse and getting denied, in this last year, let me know. I could also look at the tens of documents I got back from the Public Records Act request. It wasn't that hard for me to review. I just didn't read every page. So the answer may be in there.
I think like one question, like, kind of going back to greenhouses, is like, what about greenhouses that double crop?
Right, I don't know the answer to that, because the question is, and the question, let me see if I'm understanding you correctly. Is that if you grow what would qualify here, at some portions of the
I
year
do, like,
and then
yeah.
others. Right. So
Well,
I
and
have.
then also, I guess I should say, sorry to interrupt you,
No.
is that like, I mean, during the greenhouse season, like, we're also like moving greenhouses
Right.
as the season progresses, we turn on greenhouses.
Right.
So I understand like there's a fine line, but like,
Yeah, you know what, I want to get back to you on that question too, with respect to, because the reason you're asking this question is because the former definition in the law said, crops for consumption. And so you're asking, because you're like, well, one part of your question is that what if you grow flowers in there or something other than, I need to review, I would need to review whether the new law change expanded the definition beyond crops for consumption. Because I think that there was like the peony farmers like spoke up while this was going down last legislative session and may have gotten them to expand that. So I'll check on that.
yeah, sorry, Linda.
No.
Cause I mean, like, I'll turn on a greenhouse and I'll grow like hanging baskets, like I've seen other growers grow. But then I move those and then I'm planting tomatoes in that whole greenhouse for the rest of the summer.
Right, yeah, and then it says used exclusively for, it used to say used
Yeah.
exclusively for crops of consumption, so I want to double check. I could see the assessing department giving you cover for that.
Yeah,
But that's the other thing I was wondering about, because if you went back to the state thing,
Yeah,
it said, or one of them, it said
Yeah.
about a percentage.
No,
I mean.
no,
I
it's
mean,
good, we're good.
Not percentage, whatever the word is, but it doesn't say exclusively, it says something about giving, no, that's not it.
Maybe.
There's one that says something about, it's like, it goes to the land thing, like the land, you don't get an exemption, you get
A discount.
a discount.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that would cover us now, because
Yeah, but I would have to, so I would have to double check the definition, I would have to double check those laws, that they were not the most precise in the way they connected those, but yeah, so no matter what, the borough now has to assess the value of your structures for their farm use only, that is just a requirement. And so the question is whether that definition under the state law says exclusively used for crops for consumption or not. I don't,
and like
I
I
I think
said,
it still
consumption is
does.
bad.
think it still says
Yeah,
that.
cause I'm a peony grower and we just got an email from some other people that are trying to still advocate for.
And it says exclusively, because they told me to sign up for it, because I told them that, and I said, I'm not signing it if it says exclusively.
Right,
I'm not gonna lie,
yeah,
and then I'm the one that would be in trouble, and they told me to sign, go ahead and fill it out anyway.
okay, well, if you do that, let me know
Yeah.
what happens, because again,
Well-
we're trying to just make sure, again, this is a rocky road, obviously, in getting to the idea that I think everybody here agrees on, which is that, well, I'll speak for myself in saying that if there are a lot of different types of buildings that get tax exempted in the state, and I think if anybody should be getting a tax help, it should be the folks making food in their community. So I like the direction of this. I just think conversations like these are really important to get it to where it needs to be, so it's actually working. And I will say that these conversations probably affect how you're going to work with your borough's tax assessor when they come and they actually provide, either give you the tax exemption or not, or tax discount.
Be nice if the borough has something that made it less fuzzy, because
Yeah.
how many of us start plants in the house, in the
Yeah.
garage, raise baby birds in the house?
Mhm.
But that's not a structure exclusively for agriculture.
Right, and this is Linda's point too, yeah. And so one thing I will say though on that is, and we can talk, like, I'll put my email again. One thing I've wanted to do, when Prop 2 passed in 2023 and you got that exemption, I wanted to have a working group of folks like you in the room with the tax assessing department in the borough to create like guidelines together. That never came to fruition for various reasons. One, I couldn't find anybody to fund me to do it, and I have to put food on the table for a 2-year-old. So but if anybody wants to do that, reach out to me, and I think it might be time again to propose to them for that ongoing meeting, because like you're saying, some guidance would be nice, and it would be nice to have you guys in the room while the guidance is being drafted, because it's these particular questions that I don't think that they're necessarily considering, because you guys are the ones actually doing. I'm probably over time, so folks want to come in, but yeah, if you have any more questions, reach out.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Clay.
yeah, no problem.